Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and continuing on with the Superman review marathon. Well guys, we've only got 2 more Superman films left for me to review and a part of the Superman review marathon. So, the second to last Superman film that I'm reviewing, and you're watching my review, well, you knew what was next, right? Because, yeah. Well, after, the results of Superman Returns, not the triumphant and strongest return for the Man of Steel, Warner Brothers would try again, and it would take another couple of years to do another live-action Superman film. And sure enough, in 2013, we would get a fresh new take on Superman, and, little did we know that this was the beginning of DC and Warner Brothers plans, most prominently Warner Brothers, their attempt to make their very own superhero cinematic universe, which being called the DC Extended Universe. Yeah, I remember that's what it was called, but yeah. So that's right, guys. From 2013, I am finally reviewing Man of Steel. Yes, Man of Steel. Yeah, well, I think for all of us, we all remember when Man of Steel was announced, a new Superman film was in the works, and, with Zack Snyder being the director of Man of Steel, and whom would play the titled character. And this time, the title of this new Superman film being called Man of Steel. Yeah, it was kind of going in the same direction like what Batman had gone into, where, Batman's last 2 films in Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy were titled Dark Knight, so yeah. Because, Batman is referred to as the Dark Knight, and in this case, for Superman, he's also referred to as the Man of Steel. So, yeah, that of course makes sense, and very fitting. And the fact that Christopher Nolan being attached to this new DC live-action flick, and the fact that this came out just 1 year after the final Batman film of Christopher Nolan's, rounding off his Batman trilogy, and Nolan would find himself doing more DC materials as an executive producer, and he was one of the writers, and with Zack Snyder stepping in to helm/take the director's chair of Man of Steel, and the results of what Man of Steel turned out to be, and when all of us got to see this in theaters, and I have a little bit of recollection when, most prominently me and my dad, we saw this in theaters. I think for both me and my dad, I think we did enjoy it, yeah. And having done a rewatch, I've seen this, plenty of other times, but yeah, having done a rewatch of this and, because of the Superman review marathon, yeah, I'll be completely honest, as I always am when I do these reviews. Man of Steel, it is what it is. It's not bad as it seems. I think that what Man of Steel has to offer, how this Superman film, how it does the Superman character, the take on Superman, and with his origin stories, and when Superman would emerge to the people of the Earth, and when coming face to face with one of Superman's top enemies, besides Lex Luthor, General Zod, and with what General Zod does in this Superman film, literally going to obliterate Earth and to make a new Krypton. Just, man, crazy. And we get to see more of the planet Krypton, and, with what this Superman film does, when we sometimes focus on the origin/backstory of young Clark Kent, and before he would become Superman, his life in Kansas, and with his Earth parents, and the loss of his Earth father, and the challenges that he would go through, some new people that he would come face-to-face with, like most prominently Lois Lane, the action, the suspense, the emotional moments, just everything that Man of Steel had to offer, this Superman flick, with what it was like, I don't think it's that bad. Hey, I'm entitled to my opinion. So I think that, overall, Man of Steel, okay, maybe it's not really the best Superman, but that's not to say it's god-awful. No way. It's not bad. And I think that, with the casting of these characters and Henry Cavill, who plays the title character, pretty good, and the fact that he had attempt to play the character when Warner Brothers was attempting to make a new Superman film at the time in the early 2000s, and for him to finally play the titled character in this, he did not disappoint. But just overall, having done a rewatch of Man of Steel, it is pretty good. I quite enjoyed it, the first time I had seen it, and, the other times I would watch it, and as of now, not bad in my opinion. All right, so with the first things I've had to say about Man of Steel now out of the way, now as always, for me, read the description / the story. With the imminent destruction, I think I'm pronouncing that right, of Krypton, their home planet, Jor-El, and his wife seek to preserve their race by sending their infant son to Earth. The child spacecraft lands at the farm of Jonathan and Martha Kent, who name Clark and raise him as their own son. Though his extraordinary abilities have led to the adult Clark living on the fringe of society, he finds he must become a hero and save those he loves from a dire threat. Okay, so now, with reading the description / the story out of the way, now let's talk about some background, as I sometimes do, just a little bit, because long story in short, and as I explained, throughout the late 90s and early 2000s, Warner Brothers attempts to make a new Superman film, of course, most prominently, when at one point, there was supposed to be a Superman film with Cage and Burton, which that didn't come to be, and when finally, sometime in the early 2000s, Bryan Singer stepped in, and with what he brought to this new Superman film, which being Superman Returns, if you saw my review of Superman Returns, again, not the strongest comeback for the character himself, but that's not to say it was bad. And there were attempts and plans to do a sequel to Superman Returns, and everybody, was slated to come back. But because Bryan Singer was directing other projects, and at some point, the contracts to the cast members doing another Superman film had expired, in the end, plans for another Superman film that would be a sequel to Superman Returns never came to be, and thus, Warner Brothers would do this again, making a fresh, brand new Superman film, and when Zack Snyder would step in, and seeing as how that Zack Snyder had directed 2 big films, especially for Warner Brothers, which being 300 and The Watchmen, and because with him directing Watchmen, he was already no stranger to doing something, DC Comics. So, with Zack Snyder taking the director's chair, Christopher Nolan being involved, being one of the writers, producers, and the same goes for his wife, and Jon Peters was also involved in, the production of this new Superman film. And Jon Peters, he was producer of Superman Returns, and to be producer of a new Superman film. That's pretty cool. Because, this new Superman film would be another reboot, and, And again, little did we know that this new Superman film would be just the beginning of Warner Brothers' plans to make their very own superhero cinematic universe, as I explained earlier. But and with Henry Cavill being casted and everybody else that would be cast as these characters in this new Superman film, and with Man of Steel being made and released, okay. So, now that I've talked about some background and such, now let's dive into the film itself, break it down. So, The way Man of Steel opens, pretty interesting, because yeah, we've never seen this kind of thing before, especially in a live-action Superman film, where we literally start off with the birth of Kal-El, Superman, yeah, and Kal-El's parents, of course, being Jor-El and Lara Lor-Van, and, well, yeah, because Lara being played by, Elite Zurer, if I'm getting her full name right, again, you know me sometimes, and, most prominently, Jor-El being played by good old Russell Crowe, yeah. So that's really cool that, Russell Crowe plays Jor-El. That's pretty cool. AKA Gladiator. And, there's, I think that, yeah, because there are, in Man of Steel, there's a bit of, like, say, Roman kind of vibes. Well, I don't know, because of some of the wardrobe and such. You know what I mean? I'm just simply saying, because I think you know what I'm referring to, but yeah. Alright, but after the birth of Kal-El, well, we discover that Krypton is facing, its doom. Because, yeah, as we all know when it comes to the planet Krypton, in anything Superman, because, yeah, Krypton's soon to be destroyed and such. And apparently because, through years of industrial mining and stuff like that, went horribly wrong, Krypton is soon gonna, face destruction. And Jor-El, speaking with the main Kryptonians, the counselors, planning, consideration plans to evacuate Krypton. But all that is interrupted, and even when Jor-El is being turned down by those of Krypton, when enter General Zod, yes, who takes action of his own, where, yeah, with what he wants to do to save Krypton and stuff like that, not in the way direction that Jor-El is wanting to do. And General Zod being played by good old Michael Shannon, and yeah, Michael Shannon as General Zod, and, I'm gonna say this, with the entire cast, because, yeah, the entire cast of Man of Steel, they did pretty good, and yeah, because with Russell Crowe as Jor-El, and, Elite as Lara, and with Michael Shannon as General Zod, his portrayal of General Zod in this Superman film, oh, just really good, and totally beyond different from, say, Terrence Stamp's Zod, because, yeah, when comparing the two Zods, played by Stamp and Shannon, oh yeah, they're very different from one another, with what this General Zod in this Superman film is wanting to do, not to mention that, in Man of Steel, Jor-El and Zod, they were friends, but yeah, General Zod going mad and turning to the dark side, and with what he's going to do and taking action of his own, and by, arresting the main council members of Krypton as well as Jor-El, but Jor-El managing to escape from being, taken hostage and under arrest from Zod's forces. And, at one point, Jor-El, I should say, manages to steal the Codex and these codes that Zod had implanted and such. And basically, the Codex, to go ahead and mention and talk about the Codex, because, yeah, and a description of it. The Codex, being a genetic database containing the DNA of every Kryptonian, artificially incubed before birth. Yeah, I think I said that one word right or wrong. Yeah. It's not just a collection of DNA, but a blueprint for Kryptonian life used to create new Kryptonians in Genesis chambers. And Jor-El, well, because he took the Codex, he then went back to where, yeah, his wife and their son is, and they're planning to, have their son be safe and sound, to escape the madness and chaos of Krypton and before it would be destroyed, and the coordinates that they've set for where Kal-El will go to is Earth. And Lara, she does have a moment where, she doesn't want to do this. She doesn't want to let go of their son. but they have no other choice, and with what Jor-El says to her, and yeah, I mean, he makes a good point. Even though, and Laura's right on this, where, you know, with what they've known about the humans on Earth, and the fact that Kal-El is very, very different from the humans, he will be viewed and treated as a freak. And, well, I mean, but with what Jor-El says, very positively, you know, something good will come from that, you know, when Kal-El is older, and they'll look up to Kal-El, you know, and Kal-El will be their god and stuff like that, with what Jor-El specifically states. But yeah, so both Lara and Jor-El saying their goodbyes, and yeah, because with Jor-El having stolen the Codex, because yeah, he basically hides the Codex within Kal-El, yeah, and before, well, sending him to Earth. So yeah, with what's in the Codex, it's implanted inside of Kal-El, and thus, yeah, Zod and his forces will not be able to get it, and yeah, just in the nick of time, managing to launch the Kryptonian ship that has Kal-El in place, and, well, yeah, when Zod steps in, and, yeah, Zod confronting Jor-El, and, yeah, because with what Jor-El tells Zod about what he wants to do, you know, and with the Codex and such, just, yeah, madness, and, just, yeah, not in a good direction. And, yeah, and there's a fight between Jor-El and Zod, and Jor-El giving Zod a scar on the side of his face, yeah. Well, yeah, with Kal-El being launched into the sky of Krypton, well, unfortunately, Zod kills Jor-El, but, yeah, and with Zod ordering his forces to go after and destroy the ship that contains the baby of Kal-El, well, they're unfortunately stopped by reinforcements of Krypton. Yep. The Kryptonians on the good side, they step in and they place Zod and his forces under arrest, and yeah, all of them being exiled to the Phantom Zone. Yep. And even Zod, you know, stating to Lara that, yeah, now that Zod knows that the Codex is implanted in Kal-El, well, he will stop at nothing to locate and find Kal-El, no matter what it takes. And even if he and his forces will be free and manage to escape from the Phantom Zone. And Michael Shannon's delivery and with what he says directly to Lara, just, you know, I will find him. I will find him! And just Michael Shannon's crazy eyes. He's so good at that. And so not long after Zod and his troops are exiled to the Phantom Zone, well, Krypton facing destruction. And by the way, I can't forget to point them out because it's really cool, because with what we see in this version of Krypton, in this Superman film, the service robots, yeah, they were pretty cool, because, you know, them floating, and actually because when, like, there's one moment where Jor-El gets in contact with his wife to warn her about what's going on, because, yeah, the way that the service robot, you know, brings up Lara, just, you know what I'm talking about, that's really cool, yeah, so can't deny that, yeah, because the visual effects, just, yeah, like, okay, to go ahead and bring this up, the visual effects that were done in Man of Steel, they were top-notch, don't you think? And especially when it came to the flying shots. Oh, yeah, no doubt about that. But, yeah, the more I talk about the flying shots and such later on. But, yeah, so, the service robots, yeah, because, again, as I just said, Krypton now facing destruction, and, you know, one of the service robots, you know, asking Lara if they should seek refuge, and, yeah, by this point, there's no refuge. There's no way of doing that. And, yeah, the voice of one of those, Krypton service robots. Oh, yeah, because Kal-El, that's the name of the robot. Oh, how did I not recognize her voice? The voice of Kal-El being, Carla Gugino. Yeah, I think I'm saying her full name right. Good actress. So, yeah, I don't think I quite realized that, yeah, it's her as the voice of one of those, Krypton service robots. pretty cool. Yeah, so, yeah, because by this point, Lara, having lost her husband, and with, her and Jor-El saving their son, he's making his way to Earth. Yeah, there's really nothing left by this point. And the last words that Lara says to herself, but, of course, for Kal-El, to do better and just, do something good for, whatever it is that Kal-El will do when he makes his way to Earth and such, and when he grows up. Just overall with what Lara's last words are, they're really good. And yep, Lara dies with the destruction of Krypton, and yeah, boom, Krypton is destroyed. And seeing, the spacecraft that carries Kal-El making its way to Earth, and from there on, the origin/backstory sequences of Clark Kent and such, they are very random, but I don't think it was that bad. And, despite with what, say, Doug Walker, aka the Nostalgia Critic, had to say about that, I think that how it was done specifically in this Superman film wasn't that bad. I mean, besides, we don't want to do the exact same thing like, say, what Superman the movie did. You know what I mean? So, the first sequences we would get of Clark Kent, and before he would become Superman, with what he would be doing on Earth, we literally first see Clark Kent, older, working on this boat, and at one point, this oil rig is set to flames and will soon be destroyed, but Clark Kent, and older Clark Kent, being played by Henry Cavill, taking it upon himself to save there's the surviving men of the oil rig, and before it's destroyed, a chopper coming in, saving those members of the oil rig, and Clark going down with the oil rig, and that shot, and that was in the trailers where he's in the water. That was pretty cool. And he gets a flashback. He gets a few flashbacks, when he was a child, where Clark at 9 years old, being played by young Cooper Timberline, if I'm saying his last name right. Young Clark at 9, starting to discover and see through his vision that, he's hearing things all around him and getting an X-ray vision of his fellow classmates and his teacher, and he can't take this suspense, and just running into this linen closet, and not a linen closet, just a closet in the school, pretty much. Clark's mother was called in to help and check on her son, and Martha Kent in Man of Steel, being played by the talented actress Diane Lane. Yep, and she was pretty good. She too was pretty good in this, and portraying Martha Kent. And the way that Martha Kent is done in Man of Steel, and the more we would get of her in the next films in the DC Extended Universe, she did pretty good. So Martha calming down Clark, and with Clark telling his Earth mommy that the world's too big and such, but Martha assuring him and getting him to calm down and that everything's okay. And then another flashback sequence we get, Clark at 13 years old, being played by young Dylan Sprayberry. I think I did say his last name right. Very interesting last name. Because seeing Clark at the age of 13, and the more we see of him as a kid and when he would be, a student, because a moment where poor Clark, he's getting picked on and such, because this kid by the name of Pete Ross, whom was played by, teenage Pete Ross being played by young Jack Foley, is picking on Clark when, out of nowhere, something happens with the school bus. Even before that, we do see Lana Lang, young Yana Lane, being played by Jaden Gould. She was defending Clark, and it's great to see, because, as we know, with the character of Lana, having a liking to Clark and, not viewing him as a freak or anything. But as I just said, something happens with the school bus, and, one of the tires popped, and it makes its way into the river. It, crashed through a bridge, and everybody, is trying to not drown and such, and, And young Clark taking it upon himself to save everyone in the school bus, and pretty much kind of getting exposed for what he did. Because Pete and Lana and everybody else, they witnessed what Clark did. And then when he saved the passed out bus driver. And there was a moment where Pete and his mom, Helen Ross, being played by Heidi Kindering, they talked with Clark's parents about what happened, and her being freaked out by what happened with what Clark did and so on, and Clark being upset by this. I mean, he did do the right thing, but at the same time, with what they witnessed him doing specifically, and a moment where Jonathan Kent having a talk with Clark about what he had done, and Jonathan Kent in Man of Steel being played by good old Kevin Costner. Kevin Costner. Really cool that, he got to play Jonathan Kent. Because them talking about what he did, and, because almost exposing himself literally with what he can do, and he's very strong and such. And even Clark asked his father, what was he supposed to do? Just let them die? And Jonathan's response, well, the way I view it, because, with, his response being maybe, because he really doesn't know. Like, obviously, shouldn't have let them die, but for what Clark had to do to show off what he does, that makes it very complicated. So, and even Jonathan explaining that, if the world would know what Clark is like, then, because they would definitely view him as a freak and such, and, this quote that Jonathan says to Clark, people are afraid by what they don't understand. We've heard this before, and it's very true. It's a very true fact. Especially because, with people being afraid by what they don't understand, what we don't understand, sometimes, we just immediately are scared, and we immediately judge on someone. It's like, best example, when it would come to, say, the Elephant Man, the poor Elephant Man himself just being, judged on and not being viewed as a harmless human being. Just, So that being a good example right there. But and, Clark just really wondering why he has this, and if it was done by God. God gave him this gift and such for being so super powerful. But that's when Jonathan finally reveals to Clark the truth, who he is, and where he came from. Because, in the Kent farm, Jonathan shows Clark that, Clark came to Earth in this spacecraft. And with Jonathan and Martha having found him, and, if anybody had known, that he had came to Earth and such, then, the FBI would have shown up, and from there on. But luckily, nothing did happen, and, luckily for Jonathan and Martha, they kept him safe very well, and when he would get a bit older, just, all going pretty well. And, with Clark first discovering what he is, and that he's not human, he is an alien, and the advice and encouragement that Jonathan gives to Clark, to discover the reason why he's here, his purpose and so on, just, that's what Clark should do. And later on, with what Clark will discover and learn further as he grows up, knowing more about where he comes from and the fact that he's a Kryptonian, discovering more of his powers and such, just, yeah. And when coming back to older Clark, because, yeah, other things that he does, and even when, like, say, you know, he's working at this diner, and, hey, just like in Superman 2, there is a dickhead truck driver, you know, coming in and, you know, causing some trouble, hitting on this waitress. Yeah, Chrissy the waitress, being played by Carmen Levine, if I'm saying her last name right. And yeah, also there was, yeah, Ludlow, yeah, that has to be him, Ludlow. Ludlow being played by Ian Tracy. Yeah, obviously the dickhead truck driver trying to make a move on Chrissy, harassing her and such, you know, going for her butt cheeks. And yeah, Clark stepping in, trying to handle the situation. But Ludlow, yeah, the total opposite, where he, you know, throws a drink in Clark's face and just, yeah, being a total jerk and such, yeah. And what Clark did before he left that diner, well, he taught that truck driver a lesson where he literally destroyed his truck by, you know, having it be, you know, having it go through like a pole and such. Just, yeah, it's totally ruined. And just, yeah, well, he had that coming. That truck driver got what he rightfully so deserved. And, you know, even like, say, Clark still traveling and, yeah, like, there was one moment in it, and that was in one of the trailers, where he's, you know, hitchhiking. He, you know, tries to hitchhike, but yeah. And just like in Superman 2, where we saw Clark trying to make his way back to the Fortress of Solitude, you know, he tried to, you know, hitchhike for an incoming truck and such, you know, to give him a lift. But yeah, that truck driver ignoring him, and the same goes for Man of Steel. And also, the reason for Clark going to different places and such, and, you know, being someone working at a diner and working on a boat and such, he's trying to find a new purpose. Yeah, and this is especially after, you know, the passing of his Earth father, Jonathan Kent. But until, yeah, we get into, you know, how, and seeing Jonathan Kent dying, just, yeah. But yeah, then we see Lois Lane. Yes, and Lois Lane in Man of Steel being played by the lovely, talented Amy Adams. And yeah, and, you know, and also for both Cavill and Amy Adams, as I explained in my review of Superman Returns, because yeah, with Warner Brothers trying to get a new Superman film in the works, Adams and Cavill, they each auditioned for Superman and Lois, which, yeah, at that time they didn't get each of those roles, but when it came to Man of Steel, they would end up playing those two characters. And Amy Adams playing Lois Lane is a pretty good Lois Lane. I think that, yeah, the personality and with what this Lois Lane is like in this variation of Superman is pretty good. And it doesn't take her that long to discover and know about Clark Kent and who he is. You know, unlike, say, Lois Lane in the first Superman films from Margot Kidder and Kate Bosworth, because, yeah, most prominently Margot Kidder, because, yeah, and how Lois treated Clark Kent in the first Superman films, well, not like in a bullying way, but just, you know what I mean, just, yeah. I gotta say, probably, yeah, the way Lois Lane portrays, the way Amy Adams, you know, she portrays Lois Lane in this, is pretty good. A very, you know, very kind and softened Lois Lane, especially towards Clark. And as I said, it doesn't take her that long to know about Clark Kent and with what she discovers later on. Because, yeah, Lois Lane was brought in to a, you know, to an expedition, you know, at an Arctic where, you know, they've discovered something, and which turns out to be this Krypton/Kryptonian ship, which, yeah, Clark happening to be there and being disguised as a worker, yeah, because he does first encounter and meet Lois, but yeah, they don't have a proper introduction. And a couple of other characters we see at this expedition, you know, with them discovering and trying to locate with what it is that's in this section of the Arctic, which being the alien ship from Krypton. Yeah, we have Dr. Emil Hamilton, if I'm saying Emil right, or, if I'm saying it right or wrong, it's, being played by the talented Richard Schiff, if I'm saying his last name right. We also have Colonel Nathan Hardy being played by Christopher Meloni. Yeah. Both Richard and Christopher, they are also talented actors, and they were pretty good being in this Superman film. So yeah, with what they know so far about what they're trying to locate and find in the Arctic, and Lois taking further investigation, and when, she's taking some pictures, and she happens to have spotted Clark in one of the pictures she took, and her quietly following Clark where he's going, and Clark discovering the buried Kryptonian ship, and using this key that Jonathan gave to Clark that comes from the spacecraft he came in, using this key that has this symbol, using it to activate the ship, and also activating a few service robots, but also it activates an artificial program that shows the resemblance and appearance of Jor-El. Yeah, and hey, because, as we've seen before, with Jor-El somehow still being alive through crystals and such, but in this Superman film, it's through artificial, technology and such, and and Clark, his first encounters with Jor-El, because Jor-El's kind of walking around the ship, but until at one point, Lois, she accidentally triggers the security alert. She took a picture of one of the service robots, and the service robots started to attack Lois, but Clark stepping in, destroying and taking down that one service robot, and this is where Clark and Lois first meet, and Clark attending to Lois's wounds, using his laser vision to treat the wound that's, on her hip, and, she manages to obviously survive it, and then, further on, Clark investigating the rest of the ship, and then when he interacts with his father, he first meets his father, even though it's not actually Jor-El, and Jor-El, telling Clark who he is, what his real name is, which being Kal-El, and, Jor-El going into some background about where Kal came from, talking about Krypton, and Kal-El's people, the Kryptonians, and with him being sent to Earth, basically, to guide his people. And the further detail and information, stuff that Jor-El tells Kal-El, and showing Kal-El his very own suit that was placed in the ship, which of course being his super suit, and of course with the symbol on his suit, that being the family crest of Jor-El's family. And it's established in Man of Steel that it's not really an S. It stands for hope. That's what it is according to the Kryptonians, and from Jor-El and such. And because it's not, because it looks like an S, but it's not really an S, because, it's alien language, and with what's specifically stated in Man of Steel. And seeing Kal-El gearing up in his super suit and trying to, test out flying, and when he jumps and such, and eventually when he gets the hang of it, because, and just like what we saw in the trailers, seeing Cavill in that Superman wardrobe, and just, him in the Arctic, and trying to test out flying, and when he would eventually get the hang of it, it was really awesome, And because the flying shots, to talk more about that, the flying shots for Superman, Kal-El, being played by Henry Cavill, they were fantastic, with the technology and the visual effects, how it looks in this Superman film, pretty good. And coming back to Lois, because, at the Daily Planet, she's trying to make a report on this with what she had encountered and witnessed, and the whole thing of this alien spaceship, and, trying to, ask her boss for this to be published with what she's working on. And Perry White in Man of Steel being played by the good old talented Lawrence Fishburne. Yeah. And Lawrence Fishburne portraying Perry White in this Superman film? Well, I mean, how can you not love Lawrence Fishburne in anything he does? And he too was no disappointment in this Superman film. And the more we would see of his Perry White in the next installments that would, be canon to Man of Steel, again, in Warner Brothers' first DC cinematic universe. Okay, so as I was saying, Lois is trying to write on this story, get it out, and for it to be published through the Daily Planet with what she encountered and witnessed with Kal-El, the ship, but Perry just flat out turning her down, and she actually reaches out to someone she knows by the name of Glenn Woodburn, being played by Chad Krawchuk, I think, if I'm saying his last name right, to get this out there online, for it to be leaked and such. And coming back to Kal-El, because, he eventually would reunite with his Earth mother, Martha. And, because it's a nice little family reunion, and, he even says to Martha that he's not going anywhere. And coming back to Lois, she's getting down on the investigation and case to know more about Kal-El. And actually, because, she interviews and talks with those that knew Kal-El, even Pete Ross. Yeah, we see older Pete Ross being played by Joseph Cranford, and with her finding and, talking with Pete some about, Clark. And eventually, she then would find herself at Smallville, Kansas, and meeting with Martha for the first time about her son Clark, and then she would find herself at a cemetery where Jonathan Kent's gravestone is at, and that's when Clark steps in, and, she tells Lois for this not to be published and stuff like that, but even Lois, telling Clark that it's eventually going to get out there. This will, and, I mean, she does have a point, but even by this point, Clark, he's not ready for the world to know about him and what he's like. And when, Jonathan is talked about, and, Clark talking to Lois about some of his father, and with, the whole thing of Jonathan keeping Clark safe and, not for the world, to know what he's like, the world not ready to know that he's an alien and with the capabilities he has. And another flashback we get is, where, we see Clark older, and it is Henry Cavill. He's on the road with his Earth parents, and, Clark just upset and, saying to Jonathan that, you're not my father and stuff like that, and the conversation that goes on, it's very, it's very upsetting, and with what's going on through Clark. But for that to happen right as a tornado emerges. A tornado, starts to emerge, and the people evacuating, getting, taking cover and such. And Martha, because Clark and Jonathan, they got out of the vehicle, and when Martha got out, she accidentally left the dog, the family dog, in the car. So so when everybody is, evacuating and finding shelter underneath a bridge, well, when realizing that their family dog is still in the vehicle, Jonathan taking it upon himself to rescue and to get the dog out of there, and and Jonathan is stuck in the vehicle at one point, but when he gets out, because time's running out, and Clark wanted to take it upon himself to dash to save Jonathan, but Jonathan just telling him not to, just to stay there, because, And ultimately, Jonathan, he dies by the tornado. Because the tornado engulfs him, and he's gone. And that delivery performance from Cavill, just, Dad! Like, oh, that was so good. Just, ugh. at that moment right there, and just to think, the last thing that Clark said to his Earth father, that you're not my father, and so on, just, ugh, that hits you right there, yeah. But yeah, and after that, and coming back to Clark and Lois, yeah, Lois does oblige for his story not to be known and, for his identity to be revealed and such, yeah. However, even after, say, Perry scolded Lois for what she did, but at the same time, Perry then showed some positivity towards Lois that, well, it seemed like he did believe her all this time, but, the fact that, with him being very precautious with what Lois was doing and such, just, yeah, with what Perry specifically said to Lois. And after that, because, the more time Clark spends with his Earth mother, Martha, everything's going pretty well. And even when at one point, the military then starts to locate something that's in the orbit of Earth, and where the moon is. This spacecraft, whatever it is, just, it's very odd. And, General Swanwick, whom we see right up to here, the general being played by Harry Lennox, another pretty good actor, because with him, Dr. Hamilton, and Colonel Nathan, sorry, I gotta slow down, Colonel Nathan, being there when they see what's in space, what they're seeing on the monitors, the satellite and such, and then out of nowhere, every single television, even the monitors, everything, every device that has a screen is infiltrated by, what's in space, and that being Zod. Zod has returned, and he sends out this message to the entire population of Earth that you're not alone. And then Zod popping in and requesting that they hand over one of theirs, Kal-El, who's an alien like them, and, he resides on the planet Earth, and if they turn over Kal-El, then they will all be spared. And Kal-El, he had a good feeling that, Zod would not keep his promise. He would not keep his word on sparing all of those on Earth. No way. Just, And, Kal-El, he's kind of in a tough spot on what he should do. In fact, there's a moment where he talked with this priest at a church on, even telling the priest, the father, that he is Kal-El. And, Father Leone, I think I'm saying the name right, being played by Coburn Goss. He shares to the father that he's Kal-El and, with what he should do specifically. And, ultimately, he is going to turn himself in. Even the father, he seemed to take this pretty well. In fact, he shared to Clark, right before he walked out of the church, that, faith and such, stepping in, and, the whole thing of trust, and for Clark, not really sure if the people of Earth should be trusted besides, Zod and his forces. Trust comes later. With what the father specifically said, he makes a good point. And, then, also, stupid Woodburn, because, Lois, how is she supposed to know that, Woodburn would not be trusted very well? Because Woodburn does say on a news broadcast that Lois from the Daily Planet knows this Kal-El. So, thanks to Woodburn, this would lead to Lois getting brought in by the FBI, the military and such, and, even, Perry called up Lois, warning her about this, but, unfortunately, when she tried to, run away and not be caught by the FBI, she ultimately did, And when Kal-El learns about this, because after he talked with the father at the church, that's when, he does turn himself over to the FBI and such, and and he wants to make sure that Lois will be let go safe and sound, and, he wants to see her. And he even let them cuff him, even though he can break off those cuffs, and with what Clark specifically stated to Lois about why he let them cuff him, just... He makes a good point, And the conversation that Clark and Lois have while they're in the brig, just, and when Lois does point out the symbol on his suit, which looks like an S, but it's not. Clark explaining that where he comes from, which being Krypton, it stands for hope in the Kryptonian way. Yeah. And Clark then having a conversation with those that can see them through the glass mirror/window, that whole thing. He has a conversation with the general, that, they should trust him and such. Even then he finally breaks out of those cuffs and just, explaining to them about General Zod and that, he needs to take down Zod, etc., and yeah. It took quite a bit of convincing for them, but, eventually with Lois being set free and Clark, because, their orders were to turn Kal-El over to Zod and his forces, and, that's what happens. But, just overall, with what Superman specifically said to them about Zod, and, Zod will not keep his word about sparing all of them on Earth, So, eventually, when, they arrive at the coordinates where to meet with Zod and his troops, And by the way, the other, one of the other main members of Zod's reinforcements, Fiora, if I'm saying her name right, being played by Anchi Trow, if I'm getting her full name right again, me sometimes. She was very intimidating, and, just like, say, how Ursa was in the first two Superman films, it wouldn't be the same if we didn't have a evil, intimidating, female Kryptonian criminal. So, serving under Zod. But, so, with, as it was planned, Superman being brought in, and, they will take Superman with them. However, Zod also wants Lois to come along as well. Because, somehow Zod started to learn about Lois and her connections with Kal-El. But so ultimately, both Kal-El and Lois, they're brought on board. Oh, and by the way, I meant to say the U.S. Army, not the military. Specifically the U.S. Army. My bad. Anyway, so, continuing on to speed things up some, because, with Kal-El and Lois coming face-to-face with Zod for the very first time, and something unexpectedly happens to Kal-El where, because, he had gotten so used to the Earth's gravity, but when he boards Zod's ship, he's not used to it, and with what's specifically said. And, then he passes out, and he starts to have a dream/vision where Zod is there, and Zod going into so much detail about, how and his fellow troops, his fellow evil criminal Kryptonians escaped the Phantom Zone. They escaped not long after the destruction of Krypton, and they salvaged some equipment from Kryptonian outposts, and basically, long story short, Zod is going to attempt to make a new Krypton planet and using Earth to, have this new Krypton planet be born, and, with that, it's literally going to destroy all of humankind. And, of course, Superman's not going to let this happen. And, also, to name some of the other, Kryptonian characters, like, there's Toran being played by Richard Ketrone. I think I'm saying the last name right. And there's also Jax-Ur being played by Mackenzie Gray. And Jax-Ur, he's like this surgeon, and whom is on Zod's side, because at one point, he's supposed to extract something from Kal-El, and that has to do with what they're going to do in order to make this new Krypton planet. And also, there's Zor-El, played by Julian Richings, and Rosar, being played by Mary Black. They were two of the council members of Krypton. And finally, there's Kar-Vex, being played by Samantha Wynn. So to name the other Kryptonian characters, but so Lois, coming back to her, because her being thrown, and still being held hostage, and actually she managed to hold on to the key that Kal-El had, and by using it, and just so happens there's a keyhole where she can place the key in, and she activates the artificial, program of Jor-El. Yep, Jor-El emerging, and yep, Lois meeting Jor-El for the first time, and Jor-El having been summoned and programmed, he starts to help each Lois and Kal-El trying to escape the ship, and because Jor-El guiding Lois through the parts of the ship, and in order to evacuate and to, still hold on to the key piece. And, so thanks to Jor-El, getting Lois out, taking an escape pod, and when we come back to Kal-El, because, by this point, the alarm, the alarm went off because, with Lois escaping the ship, and Kal-El breaking through, the bars, because being held down, and, Superman managing to escape with the help of his father, and, because, the advice that Jor-El gives to, save those that are on the planet Earth as well as Lois, and, Superman getting out of the ship, opening an escape hatch, and, Lois by this point, because, the escape pod she was in then began to, start to damage and, crash down on Earth. But Superman saving Lois from that, and they've made their way back to Smallville, Kansas. And what Zod does next, well, he believes that at one point, thinking that the Codex is hidden in Kal-El's spacecraft that he was in when he first arrived on Earth as a baby. So, Zod and his troops planning an invasion down on Earth, and when going straight to the Kent house, the farm and such, and Martha, her first encounter with Zod and his forces. Because, when Zod demands to know where the ship is, what Martha says in return, go to hell. Nice on you, Martha, but Zod, taking down Martha, demanding to know where the ship is, and it didn't take too long for Kal-El to hear and be aware that his mother was in peril. She was in a troubled situation with Zod being there, and Superman, having saved Lois from the crashing escape pod, he then makes his way to confront and stop Zod from almost attacking his Earth mother. And what happens next? There's no denying that was really cool, right? Where, an entire fight between Superman and, Zod's reinforcements. And, by the way, he didn't get the name Superman just yet. Because, to stick with Kal-El for now, that whole sequence where, in Smallville, Kansas, Kal-El fighting against, Zod's troops, most prominently Toran, and, Faora, again, if I might be pronouncing her name right? And not to mention that 7-Eleven prominently appearing during the fight sequences, and by this point, the U.S. Army showing up, and, not only are they targeting Zod's troops, but they're also going to target Superman. Golly, they don't know yet they don't know yet that he's on their side. He's trying to take down the bad Kryptonians, but because Colonel Nathan being there, because again, them taking down, Zod's troops as well as Kal-El, but just again, overall, that whole fight sequence, and with Kal-El and the bad Kryptonians, just really cool, with great visuals, a lot of explosions, and in the end, because with Kal-El managing to defeat them, they do evacuate, they head back up to the main ship, and when Colonel Nathan addresses to, the U.S. Army soldiers that, fully realizing that Kal-El is on their side. And finally, because, they now can see that. And because he is, jeez. Anyways, so and luckily, they did manage to, find and locate Kal-El's spacecraft. And, again, with Zod believing that the Codex is in the spacecraft. And again, because with Zod wanting to gain control of the Codex in order to create this new Krypton planet and such, So what Zod is going to do next? Well, by having their spacecrafts to be in different positions of Earth, one in Metropolis and one in the ocean, where basically they're going to fire off these beams and these gravity beams and such. And yeah, it's basically going to cause so much mayhem, and which would lead to still them in order to make a new Krypton planet. Meanwhile, Superman and Lois, they once again turn to the U.S. Army, to General Swanwick and also Dr. Hamilton about the baby spacecraft, best way to put it, that Kal-El came in when arriving on Earth, because basically the spacecraft of Kal-El's, there could be a solution where it can provide like a black hole, and with the mentioning of the Phantom Zone, and to dispose all of Zod's fellow criminal Kryptonians, and with his ships, And Dr. Hamilton, he believes that possibly this can work, and because, science. But and Colonel Nathan being there too, and, having the full confidence now in Kal-El, and by this point they all do. So, they proceed as suggested by Kal-El, as well as Lois and such, and with the plans to launch the spacecraft and for it to cause mayhem on Zod and his fellow criminal Kryptonians, his troops. And with Dr. Hamilton, Colonel Nathan, as well as Lois being on board the craft with the spacecraft of Kal-El's, and Lois having that key, and, by putting it in the spacecraft, however, it doesn't go in fully, and that actually, because Dr. Hamilton discovered that, even Lois too, because, it needs to be turned some, the spacecraft needs to be turned some, in order for, the key to go in fully, because Superman also attempting to take down the gravity beams, from, those ships where, by shooting these gravity beams down to, I think, pretty much to the Earth's core. And, with this happening, we see in Metropolis that Metropolis starts to, have a massive earthquake, and, basically the buildings starting to crumble and so on. And Perry White and those at the Daily Planet witnessing this. And by the way, speaking more of the Daily Planet, I meant to bring this up earlier. No Jimmy Olsen in Man of Steel. That's interesting. But I think at the same time, this Superman film worked out fine with no Jimmy Olsen. And that also goes for Lex Luthor. I mean, there is a little Easter egg / reference to Lex Luthor, but until I get to that shortly. Okay, and again, with Perry White and those at the Daily Planet evacuating the Daily Planet building and to escape and avoid the destruction outside of Metropolis with the, the beams and, The other members of the Daily Planet, there's Steve Lombard, I think, I'm saying the last name right, being played by Michael Kelly, and Jenny being played by Rebecca Bueller. I think I'm saying her last name right. Yeah, for sure. And also in the U.S. Army, we have Major Carrie Ferris being played by Christina Wren. Yeah, and she gets one moment of hers, towards the end of the film. But I mean, just overall, with what we get of the other characters from Steve Lombard, Jenny, Major Carrie Ferris, they were pretty good side characters. Yeah. Anyway, so again, from Perry, Steve, Jenny, and all those of Daily Planet evacuating and, nearly getting killed and such, and they managed to survive this, and coming back to Superman actually fighting off, the ship that's providing the gravity beam, and, but eventually, and to still speed things up some, between what Superman is doing, and from Dr. Hamilton, Lois, the Colonel, and especially on Dr. Hamilton's part, managing to smack the key hard, and once some of Zod's troops, and most prominently Fiora, board the aircraft, well, they're too late by this point, because, yeah, Nathan making the heroic sacrifice, and when he comes face-to-face with Fiora, because he did earlier, at Smallville, Kansas, and yeah, because a good man going down, what he specifically said, and yeah, making the ultimate sacrifice, him and along with Dr. Hamilton, crashing the aircraft with Superman's spacecraft into one of those ships. And Lois, yeah, she did manage to survive that, where, yeah, she literally flew out the back of the aircraft, and yeah. And for Superman, well, he managed to destroy, the ship with the other ship with the gravity beam. So yeah, and man, because at times where Kal-El is screaming in agony and pain, just so good. But he manages to pull through some of that pain because he is a Kryptonian. So yeah. And after that, because, yeah, Superman being very quick to save Lois from almost falling to her death, and, yeah, once those ships are destroyed, and pretty much, yeah, all of Zod's, reinforcements, yeah, his troops, I should say, they're all destroyed, and, yep, thanks to, yep, the spacecraft of Kal-El's, yep, it worked out in the end. And a moment where, yeah, after Superman saved Lois, Perry, Jenny, and, Steve, they see and witness Superman, landing Lois down to safety. And, yeah, Lois and Kal-El, and by this point, he's been given the code name Superman. Yep, he finally gets the name Superman. Both Superman and Lois, point being, they finally kiss. And it was a pretty funny moment because the dialogue that each of them have about, the kiss that they had, and they kiss again. Yeah, but that's interrupted when, yeah, Zod is still alive and breathing. And Zod, he can't believe what has just happened. And with what he says to Kal-El, that with what Kal-El destroyed, along with Lois, Dr. Hamilton, and the Colonel, yeah, what Zod was going to do, just, yeah, bring to life a new Krypton planet. But between Jor-El and Kal-El, with what each of them said to Zod, and yeah, because early on, there was a moment where Jor-El and Zod interacted with each other, and of course, yeah, not the Jor-El, but the AI, duplicate of Jor-El, with what he specifically said to Zod, that, yeah, it's just maddening with what Zod was going to do. Literally obliterate all of humankind, and in order to create this new Krypton planet. Just, yeah, this Zod being the total opposite of the Zod that Terrence Stamp played, because that Zod, all he wanted was power, and for those to kneel before him, be a ruler of a planet. But for this Zod, Michael Shannon, yeah, total opposite. But yeah, again, with what each Jor-El and then Kal-El, each of them say to Zod about, that he's a madman, he's a monster, and just, yeah, what he was going to do, just crazy and not in the good way. Even with what Jor-El, what he wanted to do in order to save those on Krypton, just, yeah. And Zod, well, he's not giving up, and now we come to say both Zod and Kal-El, now named Superman, going at it against each other. And yeah, that whole sequence where they're fighting, they're tearing down buildings, and during that sequence, and even with Zod's ships doing those gravity beams, well, as we all know, Bruce Wayne was present at Metropolis, and with what he witnessed and experienced, and for a while having a hatred towards Kal-El, blaming and, pinning this on Kal-El, that, this son of a bitch brought this war upon us, but of course Kal-El didn't. Yeah. But that's, of course, another story for, yeah, Dawn of Justice. But anyways, back on point, because, yeah, again, that whole sequence where Zod and Superman crashing through a lot of buildings of Metropolis, and, yeah, just, them fighting and Superman trying to take down Zod, and, yeah, Then when it would like lead to say, and yeah, because I mentioned about, you know, a little Easter egg and reference to Lex Luthor, because yeah, one of them crashes into this truck that is directly from LexCorp. So that's a little bit of Lex Luthor we get in Man of Steel, but until we would actually get Luthor in Dawn of Justice. Yeah. Anyways, then, yeah, because when they would find themselves at the Grand Central Station of Metropolis, well, yeah, by this point, Superman has a hold of Zod, you know, around his neck and such, you know, trying to hold on to him. And Zod, seeing a human family, you know, being cornered and shooting his laser vision at them, trying to obliterate them. And at that moment right there, because with what Zod said to Kal-El, that, you know, he chooses mankind over his own people, you know. And Kal-El just telling Zod to stop this, but Zod just, you know, simply saying, never. Because, yeah, this Zod, yeah, because he would never stop. He's not gonna stop. And, yeah. Then comes the infamous / controversial moment where Superman has no other choice but to kill Zod. Literally break his neck. Yeah. And after that, well, Superman letting out this gut-wrenching, you know, scream, and yeah, because with what he's done and, you know, the choice he had to make, you know, and you know, the more you think about it, come on, guys, because the more we would think about it, because there's a reason why Superman had to do that. And it's isn't it understandable and obvious? And here's another thing. You know, and I know I did establish this when I reviewed Superman 2. No one complained in 1980, and even with the Donner cut of Superman 2, when Superman killed Zod. No one complained about that at that time, but when it came to this, then began this uproar. Just, what happened? I don't know. But it didn't really bother me. It didn't. The very first time both me and my dad saw this. Yeah, and besides, looking at this Zod, because it's obvious that he was too dangerous to be kept alive. And after all that he was attempting to do, yeah, there was no way that he would be kept alive and such. And because, yeah, and as he specifically said to Superman that he would never stop. Yeah. Even after the failed attempt for him to try to make a new Krypton planet. Yeah. But yeah, I think that just overall, with what was done in Man of Steel, for once, Superman does kill someone, and for a good specific reason. And of course, that being Zod. Come on, just, you know, can't you guys see it? I'm just simply saying. But hey, you guys are entitled to your opinion, how you specifically feel about the whole thing of Superman killing Zod. Yeah. And even right after that, because, yeah, Lois, having witnessed this, she does to, you know, comfort Superman and just, yeah. Hey, at least, yeah, that was a pretty good moment right there. Just, yeah, Lois, you know, comforting Superman after what he did. Just, yeah, that was a little pretty good moment right there between both of them. And so after all that, the mayhem and, you know, the villainy of Zod and his troops all coming to an end, yeah. Well, you know, the last scenes we get in Man of Steel, well, a moment where, because, Major Carey and, yeah, because, the general, yeah, they're on the road and just, yeah, right in front of them, Superman took down a surveillance drone that was, you know, $12 million, you know, equipment of theirs. And yeah, because confronting the general about this, because knowing that, you know, they're trying to locate and find where he hangs up his cape. But yeah, he's obviously not going to let that happen. And he addresses to the general that they need to have they need to fully trust on him. And that, you know, he's here to keep everybody on planet Earth safe from harm. And if anything else is to say, you know, come from space, or if anything else, on Earth, happens and such. Just, yeah. And the general just, how's he going to explain this to, the government and the Pentagon and such? Just, yeah. Well, then Superman saying, I'm just going to have to trust you, and just, yeah. But just, yeah. Overall and eventually, that, they start to have their full trust and confidence in Superman, and rightfully so. And the general turning around and seeing that, Carrie was out of the car and she was smiling, and she explains to the general, because she's on the spotlight, where, yeah, she finds him hot. I mean, who can blame her? Just, yeah. And just the general, just, his facial reaction, that just like, yeah, get back in the car. But yeah, and then one more moment between Clark and Martha paying a visit to Jonathan's, grave, and Clark's, telling his Earth mom that, he wishes his Earth dad, Jonathan, would still be here and witnessed all that happened. And Martha assuring Clark that he did. He did, up there in heaven, just, yeah, without a doubt. And one more flashback scene we get where, yeah, seeing young Clark Kent playing with the family dog, wearing, a red cape and, posing like this, just, yeah. That was, a cute flashback we get once more in Man of Steel. And Martha asking Clark, what's he gonna do while whenever he's not saving the day in the getup? Well, Clark explaining that, he'll find a job and, yeah, just be a simple, ordinary citizen and, blend in, with the others and not knowing that, it's Superman, but, taking on a job and such. And, yeah, and the job that Clark takes in Metropolis, well, obviously, it's Daily Planet. Yep. Clark making his way to the Daily Planet, and it was really cool where, yeah, he's on a bike and his tie was flapping behind him, like, to resemble, like, yeah, the flapping of his Superman cape. And yeah, Clark's, starting his first day at the Daily Planet, meeting those at the Daily Planet, as well as Lois Lane. And yeah, obviously, Lois knows it's Kal-El / Clark Kent / Superman. And boom! That's how the movie ends. What a fitting way to end off this Superman film where, yeah, because, to end off where Clark, starts off working at the Daily Planet. Nice, yeah. But yeah, that was a great way to end off the film right there. Just, yeah, overall, Man of Steel, it may not be another really epic, fantastic Superman film, and with what I said early on. But again, that's not to say that Man of Steel is bad. It's god-awful. Yeah, just, it is what it is. And, for me, and I'm sure the same goes for you, we come to like and enjoy Man of Steel for what it is. Yeah. Just, yeah, everything about Man of Steel from beginning to end, the storyline, the cast, them playing the characters, great cast of talents from Henry Cavill, Amy Adams, Michael Shannon, Diane Lane, Russell Crowe, Henry Lennox, Kevin Costner, Christopher Meloni, and Lawrence Fishburne, of course. And, yeah, and just, yeah, the entire cast, they were all fantastic. The visual effects, the flying shots, the music and score by the one and only Hans Zimmer, Zack Snyder's direction, Christopher Nolan, Jon Peters being involved, what this Superman film was like with its storyline, the intenseful moments, the funny and emotional moments, the climax, the battle in Smallville, Kansas, Metropolis between Superman and Zod and his forces, just, yeah, everything about Man of Steel was pretty good. And I'm giving Man of Steel, yeah, just why not? 7 out of 10 stars. Yes, 7 out of 10 stars for Man of Steel. And what about you guys? What did you think of Man of Steel itself? Any of you that got to experience this in theaters, were you excited and prepped for when this new Superman film at the time was on its way and when you finally saw it? Any of you that did enjoy it, and, if you have any favorite moments, and, the cast members, certain moments here and there, the dialogue, and, and if you're okay with the whole thing of Superman killing Zod, and, with what else goes on in this movie, and with what Zack Snyder, Christopher Nolan, and the others brought to this Superman film, just overall, what do you think of Man of Steel itself, and if it's one of your top favorite Superman films? And with what I've had to say, my review, and what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Man of Steel. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I will see you guys in the next video / review. And, well, there's only one more Superman film left for me to review, part of the Superman Review Marathon. So stay tuned later tonight, because the last Superman film that I'll be reviewing, part of the Superman Review Marathon, well, this does count, being something, that's a Superman film, and it's another animated film, and it does center on Superman's super dog. I think you know exactly what it is that I'm talking about and describing. Just, again, stay tuned for that. The last Superman-related film that I'll be reviewing to end off the Superman Review Marathon, which that, of course, being DC League of Super Pets. Take care, and until Dawn of Justice, peace out.